officers as demonstrators. Organizers said the protest in Berkeley was designed as an act of non-violent civil disobedience, similar to a 1999 demonstration in the same location. During that protest, hundreds of people shut down the interstate in a dispute over minority hiring for road construction projects. Those are the headlines. Up next, Empower Hour with Deshauna Spencer. Askia Mohammed has 255 headlines. I am Gloria Minot.
WPFW, Washington.
Deshauna Spencer, and this is Empower Hour. So September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. It is estimated that 100,000 Americans are currently living with sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell occurs in 1 in 500 African American births. In addition, 1 in 12 African Americans carry the sickle cell trait. So in the studio to discuss sickle cell anemia in detail and how we can make a difference, in the studio I have Grace Huber, Community Engagement Representative with Be The Match, and Iola Williams, who is the Executive Director for Sickle Cell Association of the National Capital Area. So before we get started with our conversation, I definitely want my listeners to join in. You can tweet using the hashtag Empower Hour, or you can call 202-588-0893 and we'll get your questions on during the segment. So Grace and Miss Williams, welcome to Empower Hour 89.3 FM.
Oh, it's wonderful I'm excited that you invited me.
Yes, thank you for inviting us.
I really wanted to have you on to talk about sickle cell. I really feel like this, with this being Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and despite you hear a lot of things, some things about sickle cell, but I really feel like people may not know as much as they should know about sickle cell anemia. I know, Miss Iola, you've been in this business for many years.
50 years.
Over 50. Well, you don't look it as a nurse. And what do you think is one of what do you think is something that people may not know about sickle cell?
Well, first let me tell you what sickle cell disease is.
Okay.
Sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder, meaning that you're born with it. It's a disorder of the hemoglobin, and that is the red coloring of your red blood cells. There are over 200 different types of hemoglobin. And so therefore, everybody only has 2 genes of hemoglobins. So with the combination of those 200 or more, as you see, there are many different types of hemoglobin. Sickle hemoglobin is one of them. Okay. The type of hemoglobin that we call normal is what we call the A hemoglobin. In order to have a sickle cell disease, you have to have 2 abnormal genes, at least one of which is a sickle gene. Okay. Since there are so many different genes, if you have a sickle gene and another abnormal gene, you have another type of sickle cell disease. Now, what I mentioned earlier, the sickle gene, 2 sickle genes, that is when you have what we call sickle cell anemia. The other type, the other types of diseases are, as it says, you can have a sickle C. C is another prominent gene, sickle thalassemia. So there are many different types of sickle cell disease.
What are some of the symptoms of sickle cell? I know Grace would be the match. You probably deal with a lot of people with sickle cell.
Oh, yeah, we do encounter a lot of people that have family members or they themselves have sickle cell disease. And, you know, we only know a small portion of what they go through because of the fact that for some it's more severe, and for others it's not as severe. But I know some of the side effects from sickle cell disease that people are going through involve pain. They just have constant pain because the oxygen is not being carried through their body like it should, because the sickle cells are disformed, so they don't pass through the body like they should, carrying oxygen to all of the areas of your body. So they often just many different forms of side effects with headaches, nausea, pain. I just it varies.
It varies
with every individual.
I know, Miss Iola, you're going to add to that?
I wanted to add to that. In infancy, one of the first signs for sickle cell anemia is the swelling of the fingers and toes, or the hands and feet. Okay, and that's how many children were originally diagnosed. All parents should look out for these symptoms. As you get older, there are other symptoms, and it depends on what diagnosis you have. Again, many people don't have any complications or symptoms, and some other people have all of the symptoms. Now, with SS sickle cell anemia, pain is a hallmark diagnosis that we hear so much about.
Mm-hmm.
It bothers me that everybody focuses on pain, but that's what we see most of the time in the medical setting. Then, of course, since you mentioned the oxygen, how the hemoglobin, the red coloring of the blood, the purpose is to provide oxygen to our bodies.
Right.
And therefore, the hemoglobin, the blood cells, must get the oxygen. And how do they get oxygen? Through our lungs. And how does oxygen get to our lungs? By breathing. Most of us don't take deep breaths. And one of the things that people with sickle cell must do, and I think all of us must do, is focus on using our lungs. Slow, deep breathing. Inhale through your nose, fill your lungs, and let it out slowly through your mouth. That way you are getting more oxygen in your lungs, and you also, if you do it long enough, you're going to fall asleep. You're going to relax.
Right. But that's a really good point. I know you mentioned about young babies having certain signs to show that they have sickle cell. Are babies always tested for sickle cell right away, or how do people eventually find out that they have sickle cell? Either one when it's
until the I would say the 80s, when they passed a law to say that, or early 90s, have passed a law for every infant born in the United States to be tested for sickle cell. There are a list of genetic disorders that are tested, and sickle cell was one that wasn't, so they just added it to that list.
Okay, so now babies are tested.
They're supposed to be tested, and every parent need to ask their doctors, the obstetrician, and the pediatrician, if the child has been tested for sickle cell. And if not, even if they have been tested, they must, if they have symptoms, if they have any anemia especially, or the swelling of the fingers and toes, be retested. There is a type of hemoglobin we call fetal. Fetal hemoglobin is a normal hemoglobin. It doesn't cause symptoms. So fetal hemoglobin is primarily what we have at birth. Mm-hmm. And since we have so much fetal hemoglobin, we have a decreased amount of sickle hemoglobin. It's only our bone marrow is going to make what we are supposed to have. So we start making the sickle hemoglobin, which increases. As the sickle hemoglobin increases, the fetal hemoglobin decreases. So the symptoms don't start usually in most diagnoses very early. But there is testing, and with the testing you can identify exactly what type of hemoglobin each individual has. And everybody has 2 genes. Ask the doctors. Now, another thing, when you get tested, the doctor gives you the result. Well, he'll say, oh, you have no sickle cell disease. I'm going to get you. Ask for a copy of the lab result. Don't just say you have sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease. And sickle cell trait is when you have a normal gene with the sickle cell. But you got to get that lab result in your hand, put it in a log, get a log. I ask every patient to get a log and record every episode when they go to the hospital, when they go to the clinics. Always get a copy of the lab results. That is a must.
I think that's a really good idea for anyone, whether they're testing for sickle cell or even if they're getting tested for any type of disease. I think it's good to get your lab results. I will say now when I go to the doctor, I get mine emailed to me. I just get an email, all my results, like, oh, okay, I guess I'm normal. I'm healthy, yay. So I think that's really good to get that. I got tested for sickle cell. I think I was like in the 7th grade. Some person came to my school and talked. I really didn't know anything about sickle cell until then, and they tested all of us. And I did not have sickle cell, but I do remember I don't have the trait either. And I remember the nurse that came to school telling us, if you have the trait, don't marry someone. Of course, you're like 13, like, yeah, don't marry someone. Don't marry someone with the sickle cell trait. Is that still what the common thing is now, to tell people just don't marry someone or don't procreate with someone?
Preferably, if you don't hook up sexually with someone who has the trait. However, we are not in the position to tell anybody who they should hook up with. Everybody should be tested. I always feel, boy, it's strange how so many people with sickle cell trait or abnormal hemoglobin meet. A lot is geographics. You live in the same areas. And so we're not telling everybody that you can't, but you shouldn't. So you should check out your friends and let them know. Everybody should know. Don't hide it from your friends. If you feel that this is a serious commitment or connection to this partner, they should know. There should be no secrets.
Right. And it's not like it's like, HIV, even when people live with HIV can still live a normal life as well. But with sickle cell, it's something, it's not like it's transferable.
It's not contagious.
Right.
Okay. If you're not born with it, you won't have it.
Right.
Okay. But you need to prepare so that in the event your mate has a sickle cell or abnormal gene, you know how to face it. Right. And if your mate has not been tested, now the test generally done is the hemoglobin electrophoresis. Excuse me, you were saying that you had been tested earlier. The test that they were doing years ago in the 70s was called the Sickle Dex. Actually, that test had a super amount of incorrect results.
Right.
So nobody should be tested with that again.
Well, but I'm sure by now it's probably a new way to be.
Electrophoresis is the primary test at this time. I'm sure there'll probably be soon even a faster test because it takes time to do the electrophoresis.
I want to talk about prevention. I know there are a couple of ways to prevent or at least treat sickle cell. I know blood transfusion is one. Bone marrow transplant is another one. Right now, is bone marrow transplant the only true cure for sickle cell at this point?
Right now, yes. You said prevention. Well, to prevent the disease, you must know who your partner is.
Right.
The partner needs to be tested. To prevent complications, you must learn about the disease. Ignorance is not bliss, and actually, ignorance can be deadly. As I was discussing earlier before we came on air, there are many doctors who are not familiar with the intricacies of sickle cell disease. If you have a doctor who is not really aware of all the intricacies of sickle cell, how is he going to take care of you? How are you going to help the doctor, even if he is aware, to take care of you if you don't know what should or shouldn't happen? Each individual is different. So what happens to you may never happen to another person that you know. I would like to see all of the healthy people walking around that I see quite often come together and meet people who have complications. So the young people can realize that, wow, you do live with this. But see, if you see it, it's different.
Right. So I know with great. Thank you so much for this information. You're a wealth of, like a dictionary of sickle cell.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can talk on and on.
But I definitely want to talk about the bone marrow transplant in particular, because we know that there's a shortage when it comes to the number of African American donors. Grace, if you can talk a little bit about your work at Be the Match.
Yes. So Be the Match is the world's leading nonprofit in bone marrow and cord blood transplants. And one of the diseases that we focus on is sickle cell. And you were talking about young people. We need young, healthy donors to get on the Be the Match registry, especially of different minority groups, and double especially, if that's even politically correct here, double especially African Americans, because they are very underrepresented in our national bone marrow registry. And they are actually the hardest patients to find matches for, because we don't have enough African Americans or Africans on the registry.
Is there for someone with sickle cell, if they want the bone marrow transplant, is there a certain criteria? Do they have to be held?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this is all determined through their doctor. They should see a doctor that specializes in sickle cell. They should see a doctor that is familiar with the bone marrow transplant procedure. Patients with sickle cell, like was discussed earlier, symptoms and severity range. Usually bone marrow transplants are for patients when the disease is very severe, when it's pretty much hindering any normal activity for them. Basically the doctors are telling them that this is the route they need to go. So they should always get counsel from their doctor, do their own research, get many second opinions before they go this route, because bone marrow transplants for the patient do have risks. So you need to be aware and educate yourself. And of course, it's always on the advice of the doctor.
That's true. You're going to say something, Miss Iola?
Oh, yes. I was, reiterate what you said. And the families go through, actually families, especially if you have a member of the family who is the donor, they go through genetic testing, extensive genetic testing and counseling. Of course, the doctors need to be aware. You will be talking to a geneticist and a doctor working in endocrine diseases. There's so much. Again, the bone marrow transplant can be deadly. It is nothing we take lightly. When you get a bone marrow transplant, when you see how people get bone marrow, I was fascinated when I first saw it. Actually, if you're a donor, they're only going to aspirate a certain amount of bone marrow from your hip bone. It hurts, but it doesn't hurt for long. And they give it to the recipient the same way you give IV blood if you give a blood transfusion. So it seems less complicated than I had envisioned. However, before they give the bone marrow transplant, they have to destroy the bone marrow of the recipient meaning that in the process of getting a new bone marrow, you go through a period where you have no blood cells.
So your immune system is really low at that point.
It's destroyed.
Yes, it doesn't
Yes.
exist. Right?
So, yes, to clarify the procedure, yes, for the patient, they go through chemotherapy. They need to wipe out their immune system, which is all of their blood cells, in order to take on brand new marrow. Also, to clarify, there are two different methods where donors can donate their healthy cells to the patient.
Okay.
One is the bone marrow transplant, which was talked about with the needle into the hip bone. With Be the Match, though, the donors go under anesthesia. So the process itself is they don't experience the process itself.
Or the pain, because I think for some people, especially we have such a low number of African Americans, being put to sleep probably would be like, okay, yeah, that's easy.
Yeah, and so there is pain involved afterwards in terms of the recovery process. You are very sore. Your body is trying to reproduce the marrow, the cells that have been taken, and the good thing about bone marrow is we reproduce it all the time. Again, which is why the young donors are needed, because the recovery process is better for them. They have more of the marrow to give. They generate it faster. So that is one method of donation. The other method is PBSC donation, which is donating stem cells through the bloodstream. So instead of taking it out of the back of your hip bone, you're on, it's through apheresis, which is a lot like the process of giving plasma, where they filter out the stem cells, and stem cells are immature cells that haven't developed into those blood cells yet. So the stem cells are really what's needed for the patient, so they'll develop into those healthy blood cells. And so the donor, they'll sit and have IVs in their arm, and it's a lot like the process of giving plasma, where they sit and the blood is taken out of their one arm, and the stem cells are filtered out through apheresis, and then the blood is given back into the other arm. And 75% of our donors at Be the Match, they donate to the patients this method.
Okay.
Bone marrow transplant is a little bit less common, as the PBSC donation is yielding very, very good results for the patients.
That's great. I was going to ask you about the success rate of that. We know there are complications for people who get the bone marrow transplant, but what percentage are able to be cured totally from sickle cell after they get the transplant?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers for you. All the information on the statistics can be found on our website at bethematch.org.
I don't know the percentage, but I can tell you it's a fascinating, super feeling to see it happen. And I've seen several patients
I'm sure
have the
you've seen
transplant and survive. And they had it as children, young children. And now they're grown, doing their own thing in their own business world. It is miraculous.
I'm sure that especially for someone who's had so much pain their entire lives, and to be able to do this, how long has this option been available where someone can actually have a bone marrow transplant to cure sickle cell?
So NMDP was formed about 25 years ago.
Okay.
It hasn't always been an option 25 years ago. Obviously, the process was still being developed. So I don't know if you can speak to how long you've been
since
seeing it.
the late 70s, early 80s, really. They've been working on that for years. So Grady in Georgia, other hospitals had some grants to work on bone marrow transplants, and they had to isolate and limit, since it's such an intricate procedure. It was really a limit on how many patients or which patients could participate, and since the parents had to go through extensive testing and psychological testing too. This is something that's going to affect you mentally as well as physically. So in order to qualify for the procedure. So quite a few people have successfully been transplanted. But we must remember also those who were unsuccessful. And you don't know ahead of time who will, because it's like cancer. If you get a chemotherapy, it may or may not work.
Right. Yeah, with any procedure, you never know whether or not it's going to work. But if I wanted to donate and be on the registry, what steps would I need to take to do that?
So to join the Be the Match registry, the joining process is simple. It involves filling out a consent form, a brief medical questionnaire, and then swabbing the inside of your cheek so we can get the cheek cells and do HLA typing to see if you would be a match for a patient. And this matching process is very important because people can only donate and receive these transplants from someone of their own ancestry. So if you're African American, you'll donate to an African American person. An Asian will donate to an Asian person. Specifically, if they're Chinese, it'll be a Chinese person. A European person from Germany, they'll need someone that's of German descent to donate to them. So it gets very specific on your ancestry, which is why it is so important to get more minorities and African Americans onto our registry. So the process of joining is simple. It takes about 10 minutes to fill out the form and swab your cheek, and you can do it online at bethematch.org. You can come to the local events here in Washington, D.C. and join there. But once you have done your research on what it is to actually be a donor, and I hope this session has been very educational today for everybody, you need to be committed as a donor to join the registry. Because once that call is made and you're a match, you will save that life if you donate. So the commitment part is very important.
And again, we're just past our time for this segment. Again, if people can get your information, so people can learn more about Be the Match and as well as your organization, Ms. Williams.
Well, let me say something about our association.
Okay.
We are the Sickle Cell Association of the National Capital Area, SCANCA, Inc. We are a local community-based charity association. Our primary mission is to provide support to the sickle cell community. We need everybody's help to do this. We give scholarships. We have educational sessions. We pay rent, assist with funerals and burials, and help to get food for families. So we do many, many social activities to help families with sickle cell. We need the community assistance. If you would go to our website is www.scancainc.org, or you can call us 202-271-5733. Again, I'm Iola Williams, Executive Director of the Sickle Cell Association of the National Capital Area.
Thank you so much, Ms. Iola. And Grace, if you can give your contact information one more time.
Yes, and I'm Grace Huber. You can find all of Be the Match's information on bethematch.org. And again, we are the leading nonprofit focused on saving lives through marrow and cord blood transplantation for diseases such as sickle cell and other blood cancers.
Thank you so much. You just heard from Grace Huber, Community Engagement Representative for Be the Match, and Ms. Iola Williams, the Executive Director for Sickle Cell Association of the National Capital Area. Up next is our grassroots giver, which is Ayana Yize Maat. They are founders of Sickle Cell Talk. But first is my song of the day, which is Beyond the Veil by Tamara Wellen. And you're listening to Empower Hour on 89.3 FM, and I'm your host, Deshauna Spencer.
What you see is what you baby. Fresh, that's what it is. Fresh, baby, back to where I started. Always looking, finding nothing. What you see is what you get. Won't figure it out. This is where it begins, also where it ends. Looking out, but for was really deep within. How far you love is how far you win. And your heart's still beating, get back at it again. Your eyes say more than your lips can grin. Take a breath, try explaining it. What you think shows in what you do. It's not you, but that weird thing you do. What you see is what you get. Always looking, finding nothing. Back to where it started, baby. Fresh. Every little moment changes and we take it as it comes. See our lives go in cycles, but behind the veil is so clear. But you can trust that you will only reach so far. I don't know, but we never know the fullness of it If you're looking for love, be it. If you're looking for peace, be it. Hold on to your vision. It's about who you are. If you're looking for love, be it. If you're looking for peace, be it. Hold on to your vision. It's all about who you are. If you're looking for love, be it. If you're looking for peace, be it. Hold on to your vision. It's about who you are. If you're looking for love, be it. If you're looking for peace, be it. Hold on to your vision. It's all about who you are. If you're looking for peace, be it. Hold on. It's all about who you are.
And we're back, and we're still discussing sickle cell anemia. Right now, I have my grassroots givers, who are actually my friends. They're back for the second time. The last time they were here, they were talking about love and marriage. And this time, they're talking about something I'm sure is very important to them in sickle cell anemia. It's Ayana and Yize Maat. They're founders of Black Love and Marriage and also Sickle Cell Talk. And they're here with their son, Asante, who is actually living with the disease. So welcome to Empower Hour again, 89.3 FM.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Again, if you want to join in on this conversation, you can definitely call 202-588-0893. So I really wanted to have you guys on. I'm really excited to have you on to talk about sickle cell. And I had a chance to look at your website, Sickle Cell Talk. Talk a little bit about the creation of that website and why you decided to be advocates for sickle cell and use the internet and social media to be the platform.
Well, every year September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and our son, 12, almost 13 years ago, he's going to be 13 next month, was born with sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia, and we're just big fans of social media in terms of getting important messages out. And so it was in conjunction with a couple of friends that I have who are also moms of sons with sickle cell that we decided we can do a little campaign this month and every day have someone answer a question related to sickle cell disease, and then end with an event at the end of the month to bring people together. So, that's what people do these days. They click play on the video. They, say, send me the link to get more information. Mm-hmm. So however we can get it out, we're willing to do it. So that's why we decided to put that site together.
Have your son was born with sickle cell, and I know in the past almost 13 years you've been really been real advocates for sickle cell. Before you had your son, did you know much about the disease, or was it until you had a son with sickle cell you really began to learn more about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I knew absolutely nothing about sickle cell before our son was born, and after we found out that he does have sickle cell anemia, that's when we started doing our research, and so that exposed me to it, and also encouraged me to become an advocate for sickle cell awareness.
Okay. What about you, Yana?
And the same here, and that's that. I remember when I found out that I was pregnant, and I told my mom, and my mom was like, "Oh, you might want to ask the doctor. I think you might have sickle cell trait. Yeah, check on that." I was like, "Oh, okay, probably not, but I'll ask the doctor."
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked the doctor, and they did a test, and they're like, "Yeah, you do." I'm like, "Oh," and they were like, "So, my husband, he needed to get. He was my boyfriend at the time. He needed to get tested." Oh, okay. Well, what's the chances of that? No, they tested him. Yeah, you have the trait. Oh, okay. That means you have, a 1 in 4 chance that he'll have the disease. Oh, okay. What's the chance of that? Right. And then he did. So to me, it's really important for me to get the word out about this disease, because it does, it's a myth that it just, affects only African Americans, but it is affecting African Americans predominantly, particularly in the United States. And we just don't know. We're just not aware. We know about all these other diseases that are also very important, like cancer and diabetes and all these things. But we don't know that sickle cell disease is the #1 genetic disorder in the United States. The
Wow.
#1.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like, and I didn't know. I was kind of like, I didn't know anything. And so that's why I think it's important, because it's amazing to me how much knowledge really isn't out there about this disease and all the advances that are actually being made as well.
Right. I think on the first segment I mentioned how I learned about sickle cell in the 7th grade, and I took the test and I realized I did not have the trait, but I don't know if my husband has the trait. We never really talked about it, but it's something you really don't talk about because no one's really talking about it. But I do want to talk to little Santi. I know that I'm happy that you're here today, and I know you had a little medical issue earlier this week, so I really appreciate you being here despite that.
Thank you.
Why'd you decide to become an advocate for sickle cell?
Well, I've had pain crisis in the past, and I know how that feels, and there are a lot of kids and even adults out there that have no idea that there are things that can be done to reduce your pain crises, they just don't know. So what I want to do is try to spread the word so that it won't be that a lot of people they're not aware of what's going on, that it'll be as aware as cancer and all these other diseases, because sometimes sickle cell, it's called the forgotten disease, but that doesn't make sense because it's the #1 blood disorder in the United States. So
do you end up talking to your friends about it at school? Because I'm sure if you miss some days, where's my friend? I mean, are you making them aware as well of the disease?
Well, yeah, now I'm doing it more, but at first when I was a little younger, I was kind of shy to do it. I didn't want them to think anything about me, but now I'm like, oh, who cares? It's just a disease. Nothing's really that wrong or anything. So yeah, I'll tell them every now and then. They'll ask me.
I think that's really brave of you to do that, because for a lot of kids, I know for me, I don't know if I would have been that brave at 12, going on 13. You're a kid, I'm 12, I'm 12 and a half. Once you get older, there is no whatever and a half. You're holding on to that age as long as possible. So 12 going on 13, I definitely did not have, I don't think I would have been as strong to do that. So I commend you for doing that. How do your children, you have 4 children, and Santi's the only one with sickle cell. Mm-hmm. How do they react knowing that their older brother, he's the oldest, right?
Right.
The oldest has sickle cell. Mm-hmm. How is it dealing with, and then with your business, I'm pretty sure that it's a lot to juggle sometimes when he has crises.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's probably twofold, and I often think about, what will it be like when they all grow up, when Asante and my other 3 children grow up, and kind of reflect back on family life. And we have so many different things that we're involved in that we do, and sickle cell is a big part of our lives because we're always trying to make sure he's well and being on top of it, but then also trying to get the word out. And I think probably there are 2 things that come up for me with my other children. I think on one hand, for me as a mom, I'm always trying to balance when Santi's going through something or dealing with pain. We want to be right there with him, rubbing his back or, taking him to the hospital, whatever we need to do, and really keeping a very pointed eye on him, because things can unravel very quickly. So you have to be very vigilant in that way. But then at the same time, the routine is still going on. My kids are home from school and they need help with homework and they want to tell me about their day and what's going on. So I often try to remind my children, and particularly my other children, that it's normal if you kind of get tired of hearing about sickle cell. And it's normal, my son will get annoyed with them, like, can you guys be quiet, when he's in pain, because he just wants peace and quiet. And then I tell them, and you may be annoyed by him because, geez, can I just talk for a minute,
Right.
And those are all normal things. Being a part of a family, we all have our different things we're dealing with. So it's, for me as a parent, I think my husband, it's just about us balancing, trying to make sure that they all feel heard, but knowing that sometimes there's a tension, tug and pull, in terms of making sure that everybody is feeling important and out there and that kind of thing. So I'm sure there's a variety of feelings.
You just want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things that stands out to me is that I often see genuine compassion and concern from our children. And I can recall one time last year, where my son was hospitalized as a result of having surgery. That was a result of sickle cell anemia. And when he was hospitalized, my youngest son, who is 7 years old now, but he was 6 last year, he had to go to the office at school, and he went to the office because he was sad. He was sad. He told his teacher he was sad. He went to the office because he just wasn't feeling right, and his concern was about just how well his older brother was doing. So it really affected his day, and to the degree to where he just had to step outside the classroom and try to get himself together. So he was really impacted by Asante being in the hospital because he loves his big brother.
I'm pretty sure for someone that young, and the big brother is it's like the main man on campus in the family.
Right.
The big brother typically is. So to see him in pain, I'm pretty sure for a young brother that can be hard for them to take. I know, Ayana, you were mentioning that things can unravel quickly. If you think about the day in life of someone with sickle cell, are there things that you can do to sort of manage symptoms, or do things just happen quickly and just unannounced, and you have to kind of deal with it as it goes along?
Can I just say something real quick about that? Let me just give you just a day in the life, in the sense that this past Sunday, I believe, Asante and I and the rest of my children, we walked to the basketball court. He rode his bike. We were playing basketball, shooting hoops. Everything was all good on Sunday. Everything was perfect. I'm sorry, it was on Saturday. Everything was perfect. We were playing basketball. We got some ice cream, got some Slurpees afterwards, and everybody was happy. On Monday morning.
Yeah, Monday morning.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It was Sunday morning. Yeah, on Sunday morning, Asante, in the morning, we're getting ready to go to church, and he wakes up and he has a pain crisis. So the pain is to the degree to where he's crying and he's really hurt. He's laying down and he's really unable to move. And so for the rest of that day, he was laying in the bed and laying on the couch, unable to move, and just really talking about how excruciating his pain was. And then on Monday morning, we took him to the hospital. And he was pretty much getting antibiotics and also getting pain medicine, and so the tide turned really quickly from Saturday when we're playing basketball, shooting hoops, to Sunday when he's unable to move. I mean, it's just a drastic degree or a drastic change in just how his disposition was. So it can really happen. It can happen really fast, and I just wanted to convey that just this week we saw how quickly things can turn.
Yeah, and I think the things that can be done, I'm sure Asante can step in and talk about it as well. Matter of fact, I'm going to defer to you because you live every day with sickle cell, honey, and you can talk about what are the things that you're always having to think about that you have to do to try to prevent any issues. And of course, one of those big things are pain crisis. But what are some of those things?
Some of the things I got to do to prevent pain crisis are. I have to drink a lot of water. I haven't been able to do that as well this week because I've been in pain, and it's hard to. I haven't had an appetite or anything at all. So I have to drink a lot of water. I can't be in a cold places for a long amount of time. That could cause a serious pain crisis. I can't overexert myself. I think that might have been the reason why I had the pain crisis on Sunday.
You're playing basketball, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nah, we just rode our bike for a long time, then started playing basketball.
Yeah.
So that might have been one of the reasons. Yeah, there are a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think there's a famous rapper, what's his name, Prodigy, who's part of Mobb Deep, and he has sickle cell anemia.
Okay.
And people can kind of Google Prodigy and sickle cell and see some videos that he's done. And I love this brother because he is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about how he's dealt with it, and he says the number one thing that he's done is clean up his diet. That his diet and diet impacts everything.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we focus on with Asante, because lots of times people who, when they have complications from sickle cell, it's not sickle cell itself. It's usually something else that's happened. You start, you have issues with your kidney or with your gallbladder as it relates to sickle cell, and a lot of those things can be prevented by diet, by keeping hydrated, because we know that the cells get stuck in our blood vessels. But if you have water flowing and you keeping hydrated, I like the way Prodigy said it. He said it's like Vaseline for my body. It makes it real slippery. I just keep drinking water. I was like, oh, okay, that's another way to look at it, So those simple things that we all know are important for everybody, are just that much more important. And then the other piece I just want to say is stress management. I've heard so many people with sickle cell talk about how important it is to manage their stress. So again, just our perception of what's going on in our world, making sure that we're, relaxing and that we're keeping sometimes just having to sit back. I've heard lots of folks with sickle cell, including my son, say, let me take a break for about an hour. Let me sit down for about 30 minutes. And so it's really a thing where you got to be in tune with your body. But at the same time, sometimes things happen and you're like, where did that come from? It just came out of the blue, and you're trying to learn what was the cause, but you can't really put your finger on it.
Because every time it may not always be a specific cause.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like Asante, do you feel like you're older than a lot of your peers? Because you have to, I don't know, when I was a kid, did I drink a lot of water? I think I drank, Kool-Aid all the time, or whatever else was put in front of me.
Right.
I didn't even think about that. Do you feel like you have to be older than your peers because of all the things you have to keep in mind to stay healthy?
Well, yeah, I guess, because like you said, if you're a kid and you're just drinking juice and soda all the time, you're not really paying attention. It doesn't matter. But with me, I have to make sure I drink water so that I don't have a pain crisis, or if it's the winter time, people going out for recess, I don't do that no more. But if going out for recess and it's really cold, I would have to stay in, because so that I just wouldn't have a pain crisis. I would have to make sure that I limited that amount of time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that, do you feel like there are enough resources available as far as research is done for sickle cell? Because in the first segment, we were talking about how you were saying it's the forgotten disease, and I totally agree with that. I knew a little bit about it. Like I said, I got tested in 7th grade, but after that, I didn't really think much about it. Honestly, got until I met y'all, and I see stuff on Facebook and Twitter all the time, and I'm like, okay, this is really, not that I didn't think it was serious at first, but it really started to hit home a little bit more after meeting the two of you. Do you feel like there's enough research and enough resources being put into sickle cell research right now?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that in terms of awareness and in terms of, sickle cell in the medical field is in the hematology bracket, and it's connected specifically to oncology. So when we go to his doctor's appointments, we go to the hematology oncology unit, and I'm always very aware when there are like initiatives or things happening, whether it's research or a support group or anything, a fundraiser, 5K. I'm always aware that it's like for oncology, it's for patients, which is very important because that's cancer for those who may not know. But I'm always aware that we kind of are like in the shadows, and there's not a lot of research around why that is, I don't think. But I do think that it's not that research isn't happening, because there have been a lot of advancements made with this disease. And I remember when Asante was born, the doctor told me when I was first learning about sickle cell, in about 10 years, there are going to be a lot of major advancements, and I think a cure is going to be more widely available. Now the only cure is bone marrow transplant. And And I said, oh, okay, but that didn't mean anything to me. He was a baby, and it was like 10 years. That sounded like you said 10 million years, you know.
Right. Of course,
right.
many years later now.
Right. So now, here we are, 12 going on 13 years later, and I just called Johns Hopkins this week because now they have developed transplants where you can have a half match instead of a full match, which all parents are half matches. And so I'm looking into that now. That was never available. But I tell you, I was on Facebook also this week, and somebody with sickle cell put a link on and was like, oh, they have a cure for sickle cell now. What? There's always been a cure. It just, for a variety of reasons, the health of the individual, whether they could endure a bone marrow transplant, whether they can find a match. African Americans are the least represented on the Be the Match bone marrow registry. So oftentimes, if you're eligible, you just can't find anybody because black folks aren't getting on the registry. And we have a lot of myths about what that's all about. What does that mean, bone marrow? I'm not doing that, you know. When all it is, when you're just signing up, is a cheek swab, right? So there are lots of issues, but there is a cure. And so that makes me really sad because this young lady, she was dealing with the disease and didn't know.
Right.
That there was a cure, and just to look into it. So I think in the medical field, we've come a long way, but we're kind of like at the transition period where there's a lot of advancements being made, and so the perception is having to change, and it really ticks me off when I hear people say an incurable disease. Stop saying that, because that's misinformation. It may not be as widely available as we'd like it to be, but we are certainly further along now today that I can go and talk to somebody about myself being a match for my child when that was never an option, versus him just having to depend on a registry. There's a lot more options out here, so we need to just get the information out there. And I don't think there's a lot of resources and energy always going towards it. But like I say, for most things, if you want the information to get out, if you think it's important, and it affects you, then don't say it ain't happening. You need to be about it and make something happen.
So I know you have an event coming up, and the main reason is because of trying to get more African Americans to register. Can you talk a little bit about your event?
Yes. Well, really quickly, for people to get more information, they can go to sicklecelltalk.com, but it is a Be the Match sickle cell family meet and greet. It is an event that we're having on September the 28th at Covenant Baptist Church in Southwest DC. The address is 3845 South Capitol Street, Southwest DC. They can also call 202-834-4645 for more information about the event. But really what we're trying to do is three goals. Number one, raise the amount of African Americans on the registry. So we do want folks to sign up. Just a simple swab of your cheek, no blood, no poking or anything like that. Number two, we want to connect families who are living with sickle cell or impacted by sickle cell or in the fight for sickle cell together. So it's kind of some fellowship time. And number three, the most important thing, just to raise awareness about sickle cell in general. So we hope people can come out and they can get more information at sicklecelltalk.com.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it's been really informative, especially to have someone like Asante on to talk about his personal experience, because I think it's easy for us to talk about having experts on and talk about how it is, but to have someone actually living with it, it's a totally different situation. So thank you for coming on. I know you're in pain today, so thank you for being brave to come on here today and talk about your experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for both of you, Ayana and Yize, for coming on. They are founders of Sickle Cell Talk. And you can go to sicklecelltalk.com. And if you did miss any information, you can always go to my website, empowermagazine.com. So the last word of the day actually comes from First Lady Michelle Obama, who said, one of the lessons that I grew up with was to always stay true to yourself and never let what someone else says distract you from your goals. And so when I hear about negative and false attacks, I really don't invest any energy in them because I know who I am. So until next week, my friends, stay empowered.
As the sun smiles on my face, I feel good. Nothing's in my way. I've got to gotta let the whole world know that I feel good and I feel great. I've gotta spread love today and every day. I feel good, you know that I feel great. And I've gotta spread peace in every way. Oh, 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 oh. So every time you start to feel down, lift your head and look around and say that you feel good, you feel great. You gotta spread love each and every day. Say that you feel good and you feel great. You're gonna spread peace in every way. Come on and say.
This is WPFW News. I'm Muskia Muhammad. Here's some headlines at the 3 o'clock hour. President Barack Obama has authorized U.S. airstrikes for the first time in Syria and their expansion in Iraq against the militant group Islamic State. In a primetime address, Obama vowed to hunt down Islamic State militants wherever they are.
We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven. I want the American people to understand how this effort will be different from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil. This counterterrorism campaign will be waged through a steady, relentless effort to take out ISIL wherever they exist using our air power and our support for partners' forces on the ground.
But the president did announce he is sending 475 more U.S. military troops to Iraq, bringing the total to 1,600. Quote, "We agree with the president that there is no military solution to the problem posed by ISIS," Peace Action said in a statement. Yet his proposed strategy relies far too heavily on the use of military force. It's time to stop the bombing and escalation and use the other tools of U.S. foreign policy, working with allies in cutting off weapons, oil, and funding streams for starters, which will be much more active in dealing with ISIS, end quote, said Kevin Martin, Peace Action's executive director. To coincide with the president's speech, the White House announced that Saudi Arabia will host a training program for, quote, the moderate Syrian opposition to combat ISIL. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest sources of funding for ISIL and for other jihadist groups. Oscar Pistorius was cleared today of murdering girlfriend Reva Steenkamp, but the Olympic and Paralympic track star faces a troubled night after the South African judge adjourned for the day before the ruling on a charge of culpable homicide. The double amputee, once one of the biggest names in world athletics, has reason to fear a guilty verdict after Judge Thokozile Masipa adjourned seconds after saying key elements of the culpable homicide charge were satisfied when he shot Steenkamp dead on Valentine's Day last year. Quote, "I am of the view that the accused acted too hastily and used excessive force. It is clear that his conduct was negligent," she told the packed courtroom before adjourning until tomorrow. She also said he had not acted reasonably. Registered nurses working at D.C.'s Providence Hospital said this week that short staffing is putting patient care at risk and expressed particular concern about the opening of an expanded emergency room this week, despite not having enough RNs to staff it. Registered nurses called on management to work with them to improve patient care and safety and improve hospital conditions. Quote, nurses are dedicated to providing the best care possible to all of our patients, but short staffing at Providence makes that impossible, said Kelly Fields, a registered nurse working in the emergency room at Providence. Providence RNs, members of National Nurses United, have been in negotiations since early February in an effort to address staffing and other concerns. Heavy showers and thunderstorms are likely this afternoon. Showers and thunderstorms likely tonight, low 63. Mostly sunny and cooler on Friday afternoon, high near 80. Currently it's sunny. Oh no, it's cloudy. It's gotten cloudy in the last half an hour and 88 degrees. Gloria Minot will have headlines at 3:55. Stay tuned.